While I was organizing my collection of vintage cookbooks in the sunroom, carefully dusting each treasured spine, I overheard my son-in-law Marcus whispering harshly to my daughter in the kitchen. "Your mother has been here for 3 weeks already. Ellie, when is she finally going home? She's becoming a burden, and I can't take much more of this." I froze, cookbook in hand, as the weight of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket. Little did he know that just yesterday, I had transferred the money for their mortgage payment, the same payment I'd been making for them every month since they bought this house 4 years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the photographs lining the shelf beside me. Family pictures spanning decades, many in frames I had carefully selected. In one, my late husband James stood proudly beside me at Ellie's college graduation. In another, Ellie and Marcus beamed on their wedding day, my arm wrapped around them both. The newest edition showed my grandson Noah, just 6 months old, cradled in my arms, his tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb. I had come to stay with them after Noah's birth, offering to help while Ellie recovered from a difficult delivery. What was meant to be a 2-week visit had stretched into 3 as I noticed how overwhelmed they seemed. Laundry piling up, dishes stacked in the sink, takeout containers filling the trash. I'd quietly stepped in, cooking nutritious meals, keeping the house in order, and taking night shifts with Noah so they could rest. Each morning, I would rise before anyone else, preparing breakfast and tidying the kitchen. During the day, while Ellie napped with the baby, I'd silently work through the household chores. In the evenings, I'd rock Noah to sleep, singing the same lullabies I once sang to my own children. Not once had I complained about the pull in my back from bending over the crib or the exhaustion that settled into my bones after midnight feedings. At 72, I was no stranger to hard work. After James passed away 6 years ago, I'd learned to stand on my own, to find purpose in the quiet moments. My modest teacher's pension covered my basic needs, but the money from selling our family home had given me a comfortable cushion, cushion I'd been using to help Ellie and Marcus start their life together. The mortgage payments had begun as a wedding gift. "Just for the first year," I'd told them, "until you get settled." But when Marcus lost his job during the recession, that year became 2, then 3, then 4. I never mentioned it, never kept track aloud. It was what mothers did, I told myself. They helped their children succeed. Now, as I stood frozen in the sunroom, the words, "she's becoming a burden," echoed in my mind. I placed the cookbook carefully back on the shelf, my fingers lingering on its worn cover, a relic from a time when my worth wasn't measured by my usefulness to others. "I know," Ellie's voice drifted back, softer but clear enough to reach me. "But she's been so much help with Noah, and you know we couldn't afford a nanny right now." "That's not the point," Marcus countered, irritation sharp in his tone. "It's like having a live-in maid who's always watching, always in our space. I want our house back. Our house." The phrase stung like salt in an open wound. The house that my $2,400 monthly payments had kept secure over their heads. The house where the kitchen renovation had been funded by my birthday gift of $15,000 last year. The house where I'd been relegated to the pull-out sofa in the cramped study because the guest room had been converted into Marcus's home gym, equipment I'd never once seen him use. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the bookshelf. My wedding ring caught the light as I moved my hand, the gold band James had placed there nearly 50 years ago, gleaming like a reminder of stronger days. In that moment, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't the sharp sting of betrayal or the hot flush of anger, but something clearer. A crystalline realization that had been forming slowly over weeks, months, perhaps years. I had become not a mother or grandmother in this house, but a convenience, a resource to be drained until Nothing remained. The conversation in the kitchen had shifted to weekend plans, Marcus's voice lighter now that he'd aired his grievance. I heard my name mentioned, something about asking me to watch Noah on Saturday night so they could attend a friend's party. The casual assumption that I would be available, willing, ready to serve their needs, made something twist inside me. Moved to the window, looking out at the carefully landscaped backyard. Another of my contributions. Though Marcus had proudly shown it off to friends as his project. The rose bushes I'd planted last spring were in full bloom, their pink blossoms nodding in the gentle breeze. How beautiful they were, how resilient despite the harsh winter we'd endured. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a calendar reminder for the monthly transfer to their mortgage account. I'd set it up years ago, a digital prompt I followed without question. But today, the notification felt different, like a wake-up call cutting. Through a long, hazy dream. With steady fingers, I opened my banking app. The transfer was scheduled but not yet processed. The familiar amount, $2,400, waited for my confirmation, a sum that represented nearly half my monthly income. My finger hovered over the Transfer Now button, a gesture I'd performed so many times it had become automatic. But instead, I pressed Cancel Transfer. A warning appeared. Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment? For a moment, I hesitated, years of maternal instinct urging me to reconsider. Then I thought of Marcus's words. She's becoming a burden, and tapped Yes. The screen refreshed, showing my balance with the $2,400 still included. It seemed almost wrong, like finding money that wasn't supposed to be mine. But it was mine. Every dollar earned through decades of teaching, saved through careful budgeting, preserved through modest living. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and straightened my shoulders. From the kitchen came the sound of Noah's fussing, followed by Ellie calling my name, the expectation clear in her voice that I would come running. 3 weeks ago, I would have. Today, something had changed. Coming, I called back, my voice steadier than I expected. As I walked toward the kitchen, toward the family that had come to see me as an obligation rather than a blessing, I felt lighter somehow. The burden Marcus had described wasn't me. It was the weight of unspoken expectations, the invisible contract I'd signed without reading the fine print. By the time I reached the kitchen doorway, I had made up my mind. The mortgage payment was just the beginning. I stepped into the kitchen, where Ellie was attempting to soothe Noah with one hand while stirring a pot of something on the stove with the other. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark, circles shadowing her eyes. Marcus sat at the island, scrolling through his phone, seemingly oblivious to his wife's struggle. "Mom, can you take him? He's been fussy all morning," Ellie said, her voice tinged with exhaustion as she thrust Noah toward me without waiting for an answer. I took my grandson into my arms, his tiny body immediately molding against my chest, as if he recognized the comfort I offered. His cries softened to whimpers as I gently bounced him, my hand automatically finding that soothing rhythm that had calmed 3 generations of my family's children. "What would we do without you?" Ellie sighed, turning back to the stove. The question hung in the air, rhetorical, a token of appreciation that felt hollow in the wake of what I'd overheard. Marcus glanced up from his phone, his eyes meeting mine, for the briefest moment before sliding away. Had he sensed something different in my demeanor? Could he tell that something fundamental had shifted in the way I viewed my place in their household? "Actually," I said, keeping my voice light as I continued to rock Noah, "I was thinking of heading home soon. You two seem to be finding your rhythm with Noah, and I should check on my house." The spoon in Ellie's hand clattered against the pot. "What? But Mom, we were counting on you staying at least through next month. Remember? Marcus has that big project coming up, and he'll be working late most nights." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she begun to assume my time was hers to allocate? When had my presence become not a gift, but an expectation? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I've been away almost a month, sweetheart. My garden needs tending, my mail needs sorting, and Judith next door can only water my plants for so long. I kept my tone gentle but firm, surprising myself with how easily the excuse came. Marcus finally set his phone down, his attention caught by the potential disruption to their carefully constructed system, a system that placed me at the foundation, carrying the weight of their household while remaining invisible until needed. "But Nancy," he said, using my first name in that way that had always felt slightly disrespectful, "we were hoping you could help with Noah this weekend. Ellie and I have Ryan and Megan's anniversary party on Saturday. We already RSVP'd for both of us." The presumption in his tone made something harden inside me. No request, no "would you mind?" Just the expectation that I would be available, willing, and grateful to be included in their plans as the resident babysitter. "I'm sorry, but I think I'll be packing on Saturday. My train leaves Sunday morning." The decision formed as I spoke it, solidifying with each word. Ellie turned from the stove, her expression a mixture of confusion and the beginning edges of panic. "Sunday? That's in 3 days. Mom, you can't just spring this on us. Like you sprung Noah on me at 2 a.m. last night when he was crying and you were too exhausted to get up?" The words slipped out before I could catch them, sharper than I intended. The kitchen fell silent, save for Noah's soft gurgles against my shoulder. Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly, surprise registering on his face at my uncharacteristic pushback. "That's not fair," Ellie said, her voice dropping. "You offered to help with night duties." "Yes, I did," I agreed, softening my tone as I pressed a gentle kiss to Noah's downy head. "And I've been happy to help. But I think it's time I gave you both space to settle into your own routines as parents." Marcus leaned forward, his posture suddenly conciliatory. "Nancy, we appreciate everything you've done. You've been a lifesaver these past weeks." His eyes darted to Ellie, a silent communication passing between them. "If you could just stay through the weekend, help us transition." I recognized the tactics, the sudden appreciation, the acknowledgement of my contributions, all designed to pull me back into compliance. How many times had this pattern repeated? My assertion of a boundary, followed by their momentary recognition of my efforts, just enough to secure my continued service. "I've already looked up train schedules," I lied smoothly, surprising myself with how easily the deception came. "There's a good fare on Sunday that won't be available if I wait." "But what about," Ellie began, gesturing vaguely toward the stack of laundry visible through the utility room doorway. "You'll manage," I said simply, a statement rather than a question. "You're both intelligent, capable adults, and parenthood is about figuring things out as you go." Marcus's phone buzzed, and he glanced down at it, immediately distracted by whatever message had appeared. The moment of feigned appreciation had passed, his interest in my departure fading as quickly as it had arisen. I shifted Noah to my other shoulder, feeling the familiar weight of him, memorizing the sweet scent of his baby shampoo. I would miss these moments with him, these precious early days that would never come again. But something stronger than nostalgia was propelling me forward, a sense of self-preservation that had lain dormant for too long. "I should start organizing my things," I said, moving toward the door that led to the small study where I'd been sleeping. "Would you like me to put Noah down for his nap first?" Ellie nodded, her expression still clouded with confusion and the first hints of resentment. As I carried Noah to the nursery, I heard Marcus's low voice resume in the kitchen, no doubt already strategizing how to manage without their live-in help. The nursery was the one room in the house that felt truly peaceful, painted in soft greens and yellows, shelves lined with books I had purchased, hoping to instill in my grandson the same love of reading I had passed to my children. I settled into the rocking chair by the window, Noah heavy and warm against me, as his eyelids began to droop. "I'll still be your grandmother," I whispered to him, my voice barely audible. "Just not your nanny, not your mother's assistant, not a silent partner in your father's mortgage." As Noah drifted to sleep, I gazed around the room, mentally cataloging the items I had contributed. The rocking chair that had been in my family for generations, the handmade quilt draped over the crib, the sound machine that had been a thoughtful purchase after I noticed Noah startled at the slightest noise. Would they even remember these were from me? Or would they, like so many of my contributions, fade into the background of their lives, becoming simply part of the landscape they took for granted? I placed Noah gently in his crib, my hand lingering on his back until I was certain he was settled. Then I quietly made my way to the study, closing the door behind me with a soft click that felt somehow final. The study had become my makeshift bedroom over the past 3 weeks. A pull-out sofa that had seen better days served as my bed, the thin mattress doing little to disguise the metal bar that pressed against my back each night. I had arranged my few belongings with the neatness born of living in someone else's space. Toiletries lined up precisely on the corner of the desk, clothes folded in my suitcase rather than unpacked, as if acknowledging the temporary nature of my stay even as it stretched from days into weeks. I sat on the edge of the sofa, listening to the sounds of the house. Marcus's voice on a work call, Ellie moving around the kitchen, the distant hum of the washing machine I had loaded before. Breakfast. For 3 weeks, I had operated as an extension of this household, anticipating needs before they were voiced, solving problems before they fully formed. Now, as I contemplated my departure, I wondered if they even realized how many small tasks I had quietly managed each day. Opening my tablet, I checked my bank account again, still feeling a flutter of anxiety at the sight of the canceled transfer. For 4 years, that payment had been as regular as the changing seasons, $2,400 flowing from my account to their mortgage lender on the 15th of each month. The amount represented more than just financial support. It was tangible proof of my love, my desire to see my daughter and her family secure and thriving. But love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was servitude. The realization settled over me, uncomfortable but clarifying, like stepping into bright sunlight after too long in a dim room. A soft knock on the study door interrupted my thoughts. Ellie entered without waiting for a response, a habit she'd developed since childhood, my privacy an afterthought rather than a consideration. "Mom, I was thinking about what you said," she began, leaning against the doorframe. Her posture was casual, but I recognized the calculation in her eyes. "If you really need to head home, I understand. But maybe we could work something out for visits, like regular weekends? That way you could still see Noah often, and it would give Marcus and me a chance to, have some couple time." The request was so transparent it almost made me smile. No mention of coming to visit me, no suggestion that they might bring Noah to my home. Just a carefully structured proposal that would continue to extract maximum value from my presence, while framing it as a privilege. The gift of watching my grandson while they enjoyed couple time. "We'll figure something out," I said noncommittally, closing my tablet. "Right now, I'm focused on getting organized to leave. Would you mind if I did a load of laundry? I want to make sure everything's clean before I pack." "Oh, sure," Ellie said, her expression brightening at this evidence that I was still willing to engage with household tasks. "Actually, if you're doing laundry, I have a few things that need washing too." Before I could respond, she disappeared, returning moments later with an overflowing basket of clothes. Far more than a few things. She set it down with a thump that seemed to punctuate her assumption that I would, of course, handle this for her. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best," she said, already turning to leave. "Oh, and Noah will probably be up from his nap soon. I need to respond to some work emails, so could you?" "I'll get him," I said, the words automatic, ingrained after weeks of similar exchanges. As Ellie left, I stared at the laundry basket, a small mountain of her and Marcus's clothes now added to my to-do list, despite my announced departure. With a sigh, I gathered my own clothes and added them to the basket. One more load of laundry wouldn't kill me, and perhaps there was comfort in the familiar rhythm of domestic tasks as I prepared for the more difficult conversations ahead. In the laundry room, I sorted clothes with practiced efficiency, separating colors from whites, setting aside delicates for hand washing. As I worked, I found myself cataloging the numerous ways I had become integrated into the functioning of this household. The pantry I had organized, the meal plan I had created and posted on the refrigerator, the baby clothes I had carefully washed and arranged by size in the nursery dresser. Would they maintain these systems after I left? Or would the order I had created slowly dissolve, like footprints on a beach erased by the incoming tide? The washer hummed to life as I adjusted the settings and added detergent. Through the window above the machine, I could see into the backyard, where the patio furniture I had helped select sat arranged around a fire pit, another of my contributions, though one that Marcus had claimed credit for when neighbors admired it. Memory flashed unexpectedly, James and I in our first small apartment, washing clothes in the building's shared laundry room, laughing as we folded mismatched socks. Had so little then, but there had been a partnership, a sense that we were building something together, each contribution recognized and valued. When had I stopped expecting that recognition? When had I begun to accept invisibility as the price of being needed? The sound of Noah's cries pulled me from my reverie. I quickly finished loading the washer and made my way to the nursery, where my grandson stood in his crib, face flushed and damp with tears. His expression brightened at the sight of me, tiny arms reaching up in immediate trust and expectation. "Hello, sweet boy," I murmured, lifting him into my arms. "Did you have a good nap?" Noah babbled in response, his little fingers patting my cheek in what felt like affection. These moments, these pure, uncomplicated exchanges, were what I would miss most. Not the cooking or cleaning or endless household management, but these quiet interactions with the newest member of our family, untainted by expectation or obligation. I changed his diaper and dressed him in a fresh outfit, chatting softly as I worked. Through the open nursery door, I could hear Marcus on another work call, his voice rising and falling with practiced authority as he discussed project timelines and deliverables. In the adjacent room, Ellie's keyboard clicked rapidly, her quick emails apparently expanding into a longer work session. With Noah balanced on my hip, I made my way to the kitchen to prepare his afternoon bottle. The space was exactly as we had left it. Dishes still in the sink from lunch, crumbs on the counter, Ellie's half-drunk coffee growing cold beside her abandoned laptop. I settled Noah in his high chair and moved around the kitchen with the ease of familiarity, warming his bottle while simultaneously wiping down counters and loading the dishwasher. These parallel tasks had become second nature, the constant multitasking that defined my days here. As I fed Noah his bottle, I gazed around the kitchen, at the copper pots hanging on the wall, a housewarming gift from me, at the expensive coffee Maker Marcus had insisted they needed, purchased with my credit card during a sale I couldn't pass up, at the refrigerator covered with baby photos I had printed and framed. So much of my financial support woven into the fabric of their daily lives, yet burden was the word Marcus had chosen to describe my presence. The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so painful. Noah finished his bottle, and I lifted him to my shoulder for burping, his warm weight a comfort against the coldness that had settled in my chest. As I patted his back, my gaze fell on the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator, where I had dutifully noted their upcoming appointments, events, and commitments. Saturday's square was marked Ryan and Megan's anniversary, 7 p.m., with Mom Noah written below it in Ellie's handwriting. Not a request, but a statement. My availability assumed, my time allocated without consultation. I reached up and ran my finger over the notation, feeling the indentation of the pen on paper. Then, with Noah still cradled against me, I picked up a pencil from the counter and carefully erased my name. The afternoon settled into a familiar rhythm, Noah playing on his activity mat while I folded the freshly laundered clothes, separating them into neat piles on the dining room table. My own meager stack looked almost apologetic next to the towering columns of Ellie and Marcus's garments. 4 years of monthly mortgage payments, and I still felt the need to minimize my presence, to take up as little space as possible in their home. Marcus emerged from his home office around 4, stretching dramatically as if his day of conference calls had been more physically taxing than my hours of childcare and housework. He glanced at the folded laundry without comment, his eyes moving past me to where Noah was happily batting at colorful hanging toys. "Any plans for dinner?" he asked, opening the refrigerator and scanning its contents with a slight frown. Sighed. Question might have seemed innocent to an outsider, but I recognized its underlying assumption. Not, "What should we make for dinner?" or, "Would you like me to cook tonight?" Just a thinly veiled inquiry into what meal I had planned to prepare for the family, as if my role as chef was as established as the rotation of the earth. I thought, "You might want to order in," I replied, carefully placing one of Ellie's blouses on its pile, "since it's one of my last nights here." Marcus's head emerged from behind the refrigerator door, his expression momentarily startled, as if he'd already forgotten our earlier conversation about my departure. "Right," he said slowly. "You're leaving Sunday." He closed the refrigerator and leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Ellie mentioned you might come back for weekends sometimes. That would be good for Noah." For Noah. Not because they enjoyed my company or valued my presence, but because it would benefit their child, and by extension, free up their time. The transparent self-interest in his statement made something twist inside me. "We'll see," I said, non-committal. "My schedule gets quite busy with my gardening club and volunteer work." Marcus raised an eyebrow, the slight curl of his lip suggesting he found the notion of my busy social calendar amusing rather than plausible. "Well, hopefully you can make time. Family should be a priority, right?" The irony of him lecturing me about family priorities wasn't lost on me. I bit back the retort that rose to my lips, about whose priority I had been when he'd called me a burden that morning, and instead offered a neutral smile. "Speaking of priorities," I said, keeping my voice casual as I folded one of his expensive dress shirts with particular care, "I wanted to let you know there might be a slight hiccup with this month's mortgage payment." His posture shifted immediately, shoulders straightening, attention suddenly focused with laser precision. "What kind of hiccup?" "Well, I've had some unexpected expenses come up," I said, the lie surprisingly easy. "I might need to delay the transfer by a week or so." Marcus's expression tightened, the relaxed demeanor evaporating instantly. "A week? Nancy, the payment is due on the 20th. That's in 5 days. "I know," I nodded, smoothing a wrinkle from a pillowcase. "I'm just giving you a heads up in case the funds don't clear in time. I wouldn't want you to be caught off guard." Ida ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd observed countless times, usually when something disrupted his carefully ordered world. "We're counting on that money, Nancy. The mortgage is structured with your contribution in mind. We can't just absorb an extra $2,400 out of nowhere." I looked up from the laundry, meeting his gaze directly. "I understand that. I've been reliable with those payments for 4 years now. Surely your budget can handle a small delay." His laugh was short, humorless. "Our budget? Nancy, do you have any idea what childcare costs these days? Or how much we spent on medical bills after Noah's birth? We're not exactly swimming in extra cash." The mention of Noah's medical bills sent a familiar pang through me. I had offered to help with those expenses too, but Ellie had proudly declined, claiming they could manage. Apparently, their definition of managing included my continued financial support for their mortgage while maintaining the illusion of independence in other areas. "I'm sure you'll figure something out," I said, echoing my earlier words about their capacity to handle childcare without me. "After all, you're both intelligent, capable adults." Something flashed in Marcus's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, that I was using his own dismissive logic against him. He opened his mouth as if to argue further, then closed it as Ellie entered the kitchen, Noah cradled in her arms. "What's going on?" she asked, glancing between us, sensing the tension that had settled over the room. Marcus turned to her, his voice pitched low but urgent. "Your mother says she might be late with this month's mortgage payment." Ellie's eyes widened, darting to me in surprise. "Mom, is everything okay? You've never been late before." There it was, concern, but not for my well-being. Concern for the disruption to their financial flow, for the inconvenience my hiccup might cause them. "Everything's fine, sweetie," I assured her, folding the last of the towels. "Just a temporary cash flow issue. Nothing to worry about." "Nothing to worry about?" Marcus repeated incredulously. "Ellie, we have the property tax payment coming up. 2. We can't afford to float the mortgage on our own right now." Ellie bounced Noah gently, her brow furrowed. "Mom, if you're having money problems, you should have said something. We could have, I don't know, made some adjustments." The vagueness of "some adjustments" spoke volumes. Not, "we could have taken over our own mortgage payments," but some unspecified modification that would preserve the arrangement that benefited them so thoroughly. "It's not a problem," I said firmly, stacking the last of the folded clothes. "Just a short delay. I wanted to be transparent about it." Marcus pulled out his phone, tapping at the screen with agitated fingers. "I'll check our savings, see what we can move around. But Nancy, we really need that payment to hit by the end of the month at the latest." Need. Not request, not ask, not hope. A demand, thinly veiled as concern. I gathered my own clothes from the table, clutching them to my chest like a shield. "I'll do my best," I said, moving toward the study. "I should start packing now. Dinner is entirely up to you both tonight." As I closed the study door behind me, I heard Marcus's urgent whisper to Ellie. "Can you talk to her? Find out what's really going on? We can't afford a surprise like this." I set my folded clothes on the desk and sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. The conversation had confirmed what I already knew. My value in their eyes was intrinsically tied to what I could provide, whether financial support or practical assistance. My announcement of leaving and potentially delaying payment had transformed me from burden to necessity in the span of a single afternoon. Taking out my phone, I opened my banking app again, looking at the canceled transaction. The mortgage payment wasn't just about money. It was about power, about the subtle ways financial dependency shaped our relationship. For 4 years, I had willingly placed myself in the position of benefactor, believing that my generosity would be met with appreciation, with respect. Instead, it had created an unhealthy dynamic where my contributions were expected rather than appreciated, where my presence was tolerated for its utility rather than welcomed for its own sake. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Ellie entered, Noah no longer in her arms. She sat beside me on the sofa, the thin mattress dipping under our combined weight. "Mom," she began, her voice gentle in the way it always was when she wanted something. "Is everything really okay with your finances? I'm worried about you." The concern in her voice sounded genuine, but I couldn't help wondering if it was for me or for the continued stability of her comfortable lifestyle. "I told you it's just a temporary situation," I replied, patting her hand. "Nothing for you to worry about." She bit her lip, hesitating before speaking again. "It's just, you've never mentioned money problems before, and with you suddenly deciding to leave, I can't help wondering if something else is going on." Her perception surprised me. Perhaps she knew me better than I'd given her credit for, could sense the shift that had occurred beneath the surface of my calm exterior. Sometimes, I said carefully, we need to reassess our priorities, figure out what's serving us and what isn't. What do you mean? She asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, seeing not just the woman she had become, but the child she had been, the baby I had cradled just as she now cradled Noah. The love I felt for her was overwhelming, a physical ache in my chest, but love without honesty wasn't love at all. Ellie, I said softly, when was the last time you asked me how I was doing? Not how I could help with Noah, or what I was making for dinner, but how I was feeling, what was happening in my life. Her eyes widened, mouth opening slightly in surprise. Then her gaze dropped, fingers twisting together in her lap, a gesture she'd had since childhood when confronted with an uncomfortable truth. I don't know, she admitted quietly. I guess I've been pretty wrapped up in the baby and everything. Yes, I agreed, no accusation in my tone, just gentle acknowledgement. You have been, and that's natural for a new mother. But somewhere along the way, I became just another resource in your life. Not a person with my own needs and feelings. Ellie sat silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on her twisting fingers. When she finally looked up, there was a defensive edge to her expression that I recognized all too well. The same look she'd worn as a teenager when confronted with an uncomfortable truth. That's not fair, Mom, she said, her voice tight. Of course I see you as a person, but you've always been so capable, so eager to help. You never complained, never said no. How was I supposed to know you felt like this? The question hung between us, revealing the fundamental disconnect in our understanding. In her mind, my silence had been consent, my compliance approval. The possibility that I might be going through motions out of love rather than desire had never occurred to her. You're right, I said softly. I never did say no. That's on me. I reached out and touched her hand, feeling the wedding ring I had helped Marcus select 4 years ago. But I'm saying it now. I need to go home, to reclaim my own space and life. She withdrew her hand subtly, her shoulders stiffening. And the mortgage payment? Is that you saying no too? The question struck at the heart of the matter, exposing the transactional nature our relationship had developed. Was my value to her now being calculated in dollars and cents, in services rendered? The payment is delayed, not canceled, I said, the lie coming easier now. I'll sort it out. Ellie nodded, seeming mollified, though concern still shadowed her eyes. If you need money, Mom, you should tell us. Maybe we could help for once. The offer might have warmed me had it not been so clearly motivated by the desire to ensure my continued financial support rather than genuine concern for my well-being. That's kind of you, sweetheart, but unnecessary. I've managed my finances for decades. This is just a temporary adjustment. She stood, smoothing her pants with nervous hands. Well, I should check on Noah. And I guess I should start figuring out a childcare solution if you're really leaving Sunday. The slight emphasis on really revealed her lingering hope that my resolve might weaken, that the pattern of the past 4 years, of my bending to accommodate their needs, would reassert itself. You should, I agreed, my voice firm despite the pang I felt at the thought of being separated from Noah. There are several good daycare centers in the area. I saw brochures on the community board at the grocery store. Ellie paused at the door, turning back with a puzzled expression. You've been looking at daycare options? Just noticing, I said with a small shrug. I know the time would come when you'd need to make more permanent arrangements. I guess I just assumed. She trailed off, the unspoken assumption hanging in the air between us, that I would continue as unpaid nanny indefinitely, that my retirement years belonged not to me but to her family's needs. As the door closed behind her, I began to gather my belongings in earnest. The study had accumulated evidence of my stay: books stacked on the nightstand, a cardigan draped over the desk chair, reading glasses perched beside a half-completed crossword puzzle. Small markers of a life temporarily transplanted, soon to be uprooted again. From the kitchen came the sounds of agitated conversation, Marcus's voice rising and falling in urgent waves, Ellie's responses too low to distinguish. My announcement had clearly disrupted more than just their childcare arrangements. It had shaken the foundation of their financial planning, exposed the fragility of the system they had built with my support as its cornerstone. Dinner that evening was a tense affair. Marcus ordered pizza, not my favorite but his, a small assertion of preference now that my culinary contributions were no longer guaranteed. We ate around the dining table, Noah secure in his high chair, happily gumming a soft crust while the adults maintained a strained conversation about nothing of consequence. "So, Mom," Marcus said, breaking a prolonged silence, "Ellie mentioned you might have some financial concerns." His tone was carefully casual, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. I took a small bite of pizza, chewing deliberately before responding. "Nothing serious. Just reallocating some investments." "Investments?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "I didn't realize you had investment accounts. Maybe I could take a look? Offer some advice? Finance is my specialty, after all." The presumption that he knew better, that my finances required his expertise, might have angered me before. Now it simply confirmed what I already knew. In his eyes, I was not an equal but a resource to be managed, my assets extensions of their own financial landscape. "That's kind of you, Marcus, but I have a financial advisor I trust completely," I replied, the gentle firmness in my tone brooking no argument. "Well, if you change your mind," he persisted, "I'd be happy to review your portfolio. Make sure you're getting the best returns, especially if liquidity is becoming an issue." Liquidity. Such a clinical term for what he truly meant. My ability to continue funding their mortgage, to remain the invisible support beam in the architecture of their lives. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, turning my attention to Noah, who had begun to fuss in his high chair. Ellie quickly jumped in, changing the subject to their weekend plans. "So for Saturday, I was thinking we could get Noah ready before we leave, so all you'd need to do is his bedtime routine." "Ellie," I interrupted, gently, "I won't be here Saturday evening. I told you I'm leaving Sunday, but I made plans for tomorrow night as well." Her fork clattered against her plate. "What plans? You don't know anyone in this city." The implications stung, that I was so thoroughly defined by my relationship to them that the possibility of my having independent connections hadn't even occurred to her. "I arranged to meet Janet for dinner," I said, naming a college friend who lived an hour away. "We haven't seen each other in years, and since I was in the area—" Another lie, smoothly delivered. Janet lived across the country, not an hour away, but the fabrication served its purpose, establishing that my world extended beyond the borders of their home, that I had relationships they knew nothing about. "But the anniversary party," Marcus interjected, his tone incredulous. "We've had this planned for weeks. You were going to watch Noah." "You assumed I would watch Noah," I corrected him, my voice still mild despite the tension coiling in my chest. "You didn't ask." "Mom, be reasonable," Ellie pleaded, glancing at Marcus with growing alarm. "We can't find a babysitter on such short notice. All our regular sitters are booked weeks in advance." "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," I said, the words genuine despite the satisfaction I felt at finally establishing a boundary. "But my plans are set." Marcus pushed his plate away, appetite apparently forgotten. "So that's it? You're just going? To leave us hanging? After everything we've done for you?" The phrase hung in the air, its absurdity so profound I almost laughed. "Everything you've done for me," I repeated slowly. "And what exactly would that be, Marcus?" His face flushed, eyes darting to Ellie as if seeking backup. Well, you've been staying here. We've provided a place for you to sleep. On a pull-out sofa, I finished for him, while caring for your child, cooking your meals, cleaning your home, and paying your mortgage. I kept my voice level, not wanting to escalate the situation, but needing, finally, to speak the truth. Aloud. That's not fair, Ellie interjected, her voice rising. You offered to help with the mortgage. We never asked for that. No, I agreed. You never had to ask, just like you never had to ask me to watch Noah this Saturday, or make dinner every night, or do the laundry this afternoon. You simply expected it, assumed it was my place to provide whatever you needed, whenever you needed it. A heavy silence settled over the table, broken only by Noah's happy babbling as he remained blissfully, unaware of the tension surrounding him. Marcus stared at his plate, jaw clenched, while Ellie looked on the verge of tears. I think I'll turn in early, I said finally, rising from my chair. I leaned down to press a kiss to Noah's head, breathing in his sweet baby scent. Good night, little one. As I walked toward the study, I heard Marcus's whisper, not quite soft enough. Do you think she's serious about the mortgage? Should we be worried? I closed the door before I could hear Ellie's response, but the question followed, me into the small room, confirming what I had already begun to understand. The growing panic about my departure had less to do with losing my presence and everything to do with losing my financial support. For the first time since arriving at their home, I locked the study door behind me. Morning arrived with the muted glow of early sunlight filtering through the study's thin curtains. I had slept poorly, dreams fragmented by the tension that now permeated the house. Rising quietly, I gathered my toiletries and slipped into the hallway bathroom, careful not to disturb the silence that suggested Ellie and Marcus were still asleep. As I brushed my teeth, I studied my reflection in the mirror. The silver hair I'd once colored religiously, but had finally allowed to grow natural after James passed. The fine lines around my eyes that spoke of decades of both laughter and worry. At 72, I wasn't old in the way my own mother had been at this age. Bent and fragile, already resigned to diminishment. I stood straight, my mind sharp, my body still capable despite the occasional protest from knees that remembered too many tennis matches in my youth. Why, then, had I allowed myself to be relegated to the edges of my own life? Why had I accepted the role of silent benefactor, useful appendage rather than matriarch deserving of respect? The questions followed me back to the study, where I dressed quietly and packed another section of my belongings. The room was gradually returning to its previous state, impersonal, bland, with fewer traces of my presence marking the space. By the time I emerged, the house had awakened. Noah's cheerful babbling drifted from the kitchen, accompanied by the clatter of dishes and the low murmur of adult conversation. I paused in the hallway, close enough to hear but not yet visible to the kitchen's occupants. Can't believe she's actually leaving, Marcus was saying, his voice tight with frustration. And this nonsense about the mortgage payment being delayed. It's not like her. I know, Ellie responded, her tone worried. Do you think something happened? She seems different somehow. Different how? More selfish? Less reliable? Marcus's words were sharp, cutting. We've been counting on her help, Ellie, both with Noah and with the house payment. If she's going to pull the rug out from under us, we deserve more notice than this. She's not being selfish, Ellie protested, though her voice lacked conviction. Mom's always been generous. Maybe she really is having money problems. Then she should say so directly, Marcus countered. Not spring it on us at the last minute when we have no time to make other arrangements. I leaned against the wall, their words confirming what I had already begun to suspect, that my worth to them was measured primarily by what I could provide, not by who I was. The realization settled over me not as a shock, but as a final confirmation, the last piece of evidence I needed to justify the decision I had already made. Drawing a deep breath, I rounded the corner into the kitchen, plastering a smile on my face that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Good morning, everyone." Ellie and Marcus exchanged a quick glance before offering their own greetings, their expressions carefully neutral. Noah, however, brightened at the sight of me, reaching out his chubby arms from his high chair with an excited "Ba-ba" that never failed to warm my heart. I moved to him immediately, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Good morning to you too, little man. Did you sleep well?" Marcus cleared his throat, setting down his coffee mug with deliberate care. "Nancy, we've been talking about your plans to leave tomorrow, and frankly, it puts us in a difficult position. We were counting on your help with Noah this weekend and we're worried about you," Ellie interjected, shooting Marcus a warning glance. "This sudden decision, the issue with the mortgage payment, it's not like you to be unpredictable." I smiled at Noah, letting him grasp my finger with his tiny hand before turning to face them. "It might seem sudden to you," I said calmly, "but it's a decision I've been considering for some time. As for the mortgage, as I told you, it's a temporary delay. Nothing to worry about." "Nothing to worry about?" Marcus repeated incredulously. "Nancy, that's $2,400 we're counting on. Our budget is built around your contribution." I met his gaze steadily. "A budget you created with the expectation that I would continue indefinitely as your financial safety net, without ever discussing it with me, without acknowledging that this arrangement was temporary, not permanent." Ellie's eyes widened at my directness, while Marcus's jaw tightened visibly. The tension in the room thickened, almost palpable, but was interrupted by the chime of the doorbell. "Who could that be at this hour?" Ellie muttered, moving to answer it. I remained with Noah, wiping a smudge of breakfast from his cheek while Marcus stared into his coffee as if it might offer some solution to his financial dilemma. From the front door came the sound of voices, Ellie's and another, female and vaguely familiar. "Mom?" Ellie called, her tone slightly strained. "It's Mrs. Patterson from next door. She's asking for you." Curious, I made my way to the entryway, where Patricia Patterson stood, elegant as always in her tailored pants and crisp blouse despite the early hour. At 68, she carried herself with a confidence I had always admired, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob that framed her no-nonsense expression. "Nancy!" she exclaimed, reaching for my hands. "I thought I might catch you before you left. When you mentioned at the mailbox yesterday that you were heading home this weekend, I realized we never got to finish our conversation about the senior center renovation committee." I blinked in surprise, having no recollection of such a conversation, but Patricia's meaningful look and the slight pressure of her fingers against mine suggested a message beyond her words. "Patricia, how thoughtful of you to stop by," I said, playing along. "Please, come in." Ellie stepped back, visibly confused by the interaction. "I didn't realize you two knew each other." "Oh, we've chatted several times when your mother was out walking Noah," Patricia explained smoothly. "Nancy's gardening expertise is exactly what our committee needs. The senior center's landscaping is a disaster. All those sad petunias barely hanging on." Marcus appeared in the hallway behind us, his expression caught between irritation at the interruption and curiosity about the unexpected visitor. "Well, don't let me keep you from your family time," Patricia continued brightly. "I just wanted to confirm that we're still on for coffee tomorrow before you leave. My treat, at that little cafe on Maple Street." "Absolutely," I agreed, surprised by how easily the fabrication flowed. 10 o'clock, wasn't it?" "Perfect," Patricia nodded, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And don't forget to bring those photos you mentioned of your coneflowers. I'm determined to grow some this year." As she turned to leave, she paused, glancing back at Ellie and Marcus. "You have a wonderful mother," she said, her tone warm but with an undertone I couldn't quite identify. The senior center volunteerism in this town would collapse without dedicated people like Nancy. Always giving, never asking for recognition. With that parting comment, she was gone, leaving a puzzled silence in her wake. Ellie turned to me, her expression bemused. "I had no idea you were so involved in the community here," she said slowly. "You never mentioned a senior center committee." "There are a lot of things I don't mention," I replied simply, moving back toward the kitchen where Noah was beginning to fuss in his high chair. Marcus followed, his earlier irritation apparently forgotten in the wake of this new information. "So you've been volunteering while staying with us? I thought you spent all your time here with Noah." "Most of it, yes," I said, lifting Noah from his chair and settling him on my hip. "But I do step out occasionally when he's napping or when you're both home. Patricia and I have had several lovely conversations about gardening and community service." The lie built upon itself with surprising ease, creating a narrative that neither of them could dispute without admitting how little attention they had paid to my comings and goings. In truth, I had spoken to Patricia only once, a brief exchange, about the weather while retrieving the mail, but she had clearly sensed something in our interaction that prompted her impromptu performance this morning. "Well," Ellie said after a moment, "I suppose that explains your dinner plans for tonight." Her tone held a note of concession, as if Patricia's appearance had somehow legitimized my claim to a life beyond their home. "Yes," I agreed, not elaborating. Further. Let them wonder, let them reckon with the possibility that I had built connections, created a network, while they assumed I existed solely in relation to their needs. As I bounced Noah gently, soothing his momentary fussing, I caught Marcus watching me with a thoughtful expression. Not the calculating look I had grown accustomed to, but something more contemplative, as if seeing me through new eyes. "You know," he said slowly, "I never really thought about what you do when you're not with Noah. I guess I just assumed that I sit in the corner like a potted plant, waiting to be useful," I suggested, keeping my tone light despite the barb beneath the words. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" I asked quietly, meeting his gaze. "Because from where I stand, Marcus, it seems very much like both of you have come to see me as an extension of this household, a convenient resource rather than a person, with my own life, my own interests, my own worth beyond what I can provide for you." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Noah, sensing the tension, squirmed in my arms, reaching toward the colorful magnetic letters on the refrigerator. I shifted him slightly, allowing him to grasp a blue bee that immediately went toward his mouth. Such a simple joy, a baby discovering. The world one brightly colored piece at a time, unaware of the complicated emotions swirling around him. Marcus was the first to break the silence, his voice lower than before, tinged with something that might have been shame. "That's not fair, Nancy. We appreciate everything you do." "Do you?" I asked, my tone gentle despite the directness of my question. "When was the last time either of you thanked me for the mortgage payment? Or for getting up with Noah at night? Or for cooking meals that neither of you even noticed I'd prepared?" Ellie's cheeks flushed, her eyes darting to Marcus before returning to me. "Mom, we've been overwhelmed with the baby. You know how hard the first few months are. You went through it yourself." "I did," I acknowledged, bouncing Noah slightly, as he began to fuss. "But I didn't have my mother paying my mortgage. I didn't have round-the-clock childcare at my disposal. Your father and I figured it out together, as partners." "That was different," Ellie protested weakly. "Times were simpler then." I almost laughed at the cliché. Simpler. We had a mortgage payment too high for our budget because the interest rates were 16%. Your father worked 2 jobs while I managed a classroom of 30 children all day before coming home to you. There was nothing simple about it, Ellie, but we never expected anyone else to carry our burdens. Marcus cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Look, Nancy, if this is about recognition, we can do better. We appreciate your help, both financial and with Noah. Maybe we haven't said it enough. His words might have soothed me once, might have been enough to paper over the cracks in our relationship. But now they struck me as too little, too late, an attempt to placate rather than understand, to maintain the status quo rather than acknowledge the fundamental imbalance that had developed. This isn't about hearing "thank you" more often, I said, settling Noah into his playpen where he could safely explore his toys. It's about respect, about seeing me as a complete person, not just as your financial safety net or an unpaid nanny. I turned to face them fully, standing straighter than I had in days. Yesterday morning, Marcus, I overheard you calling me a burden, that I had overstayed my welcome, that you couldn't wait for me to leave. His face paled, eyes widening in shock. You heard that? Every word, I confirmed, keeping my voice steady despite the renewed sting of the memory. And do you know what I was doing when I overheard? I was organizing my vintage cookbooks, ones I've collected over decades, each with its own story, its own memory attached. I was thinking I might leave a few here, recipes I thought you both might enjoy. Ellie's hand flew to her mouth, eyes suddenly brimming with tears. Mom, please, let me finish, I said, raising a hand gently. The irony didn't escape me. Being called a burden by the very people whose mortgage I've paid for 4 years, whose baby I've cared for without complaint, whose home I've maintained while you both pursued your careers. I moved to the window, looking out at the garden I had helped plant last spring. And the worst part? Until that moment, I never realized how invisible I'd become to you both. How my love, my support, my financial contributions had transformed, from gifts freely given to expectations automatically fulfilled. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by Noah's soft babbling as he played contentedly, oblivious to the emotional current surging through the room. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. I shouldn't have said that. It was a stressful morning. Noah had been up all night, and I wasn't thinking clearly. But you meant it, I said quietly. Not as an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. In that moment, that's how you felt. And that's okay, Marcus. We all have thoughts we're not proud of. What matters is that it showed me something important, that somewhere along the way, I stopped being Mom or Nancy and became a function, a utility, a means to an end. Ellie wiped at her eyes, visibly struggling to formulate a response. So that's why you suddenly decided to leave? Because of what Marcus said? Not entirely, I answered thoughtfully. His words were a catalyst, certainly, but the real reason is much simpler. I finally recognized that I deserve better. That at 72, my time is too precious to spend it where I'm not truly valued for who I am, only for what I can provide. I crossed to the refrigerator, where a calendar hung with various appointments and reminders marked in different colors. In the corner of today's date, in Ellie's neat handwriting, was a note, deposit, Mom's dough. Such a small thing, those 3 words, but they captured perfectly the transactional nature our relationship had assumed. Do you know what I realized yesterday? I asked, tapping the notation with my finger. That for 4 years, I've oriented my entire financial life around your mortgage payment. I've postponed trips I wanted to take, renovations my house needs, even dental work I've been putting off. All because I was prioritizing your financial stability over my own needs. Marcus's brow furrowed, his expression suddenly alert at the mention of finances. Dental work? Nancy, if you needed medical procedures, you should have said something. We could have adjusted. Again, that vague word, adjusted, that suggested minor tweaks rather than a fundamental reconsideration of our arrangement. Not, we could have taken over our own mortgage, but some unspecified modification that would preserve their comfort while marginally addressing my needs. That's precisely my point, I said, shaking my head slightly. I shouldn't have to justify. Taking care of my own basic needs. I shouldn't have to prove that my dental health is more important than your extra bedrooms or granite countertops. Ellie flinched at this, her eyes darting to the kitchen countertops, the exact upgrade I had mentioned, installed last year with funds that had mysteriously appeared when they mentioned the renovation they desperately needed. "Mom, that's not fair," she protested weakly. "We never asked you to neglect your health for our house." "No," I agreed. "You never asked directly. But when you create a dynamic where my financial support is assumed, expected, relied upon without question, you place me in a position where withdrawing that support, even for my own legitimate needs, feels like a betrayal." I moved to Noah's playpen, kneeling down to stroke his soft hair as he focused intently on stacking colorful blocks. "I love you both," I continued, my voice softening. "And I adore this little boy more than words can express. But love shouldn't come at the cost of dignity. It shouldn't require me to make myself smaller, less visible, less deserving of consideration." The truth of my own words resonated through me, crystallizing feelings that had been formless for too long. Each sacrifice I had made, financial, physical, emotional, had gradually eroded something essential, something I was only now reclaiming: my sense of self-worth, my right to prioritize my own well-being. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I recognized from countless previous discussions. "Nancy, if this is about the mortgage payment, we can figure something out. Maybe reduce the amount temporarily until your situation improves." Even now, faced with the emotional truth of our dynamic, his mind went immediately to the practical implications, to preserving as much of their financial advantage as possible, not addressing the underlying issue of respect, of recognition, but seeking to negotiate terms as if our relationship were a business contract under renegotiation. "This isn't a negotiation, Marcus," I said firmly. "I'm not asking for a reduced payment schedule or temporary accommodation. I'm informing you both that after 4 years, it's time for you to assume full responsibility for your own mortgage." The words hung in the air, definitive and unambiguous. Ellie's eyes widened in alarm, while Marcus's expression hardened, the brief moment of contrition evaporating in the face of financial reality. "Just like that?" he demanded, voice rising slightly. "Without any warning or transition period? Nancy, that's what?" I interrupted, my tone still calm but unwavering. "Unfair? Inconsiderate? The same might be said about calling your mother-in-law a burden after she's paid nearly $100,000 toward your home." The figure, spoken aloud for the first time, landed like a physical weight between us. $100,000. 4 years of monthly payments, transferred without fanfare or acknowledgement, quietly enabling their lifestyle while I deferred my own needs and dreams. Noah began to fuss, perhaps sensing the tension in the room. I lifted him from the playpen, cradling him against my chest in a practiced motion. His small body relaxed against me, his trust complete and unconditional. In that moment, holding my grandson close, I realized the profound truth that had been forming within me. I had been modeling the wrong lessons, not just for Ellie and Marcus, but potentially for Noah as well. By allowing myself to be taken for granted, by prioritizing others' comfort at the expense of my own dignity, I was perpetuating a cycle that could extend to the next generation. What would Noah learn about respect, about the value of contribution, about the balance of giving and receiving, if he grew up watching his grandmother treated as an accessory rather than a person worthy of consideration? The realization strengthened my resolve, cementing the decision I had already made, not just to withhold this month's payment, but to permanently recalibrate our relationship. "I'm not abandoning you," I said softly, pressing a kiss to Noah's forehead. "I'm not withdrawing my love or my presence in your lives, but from now on, that presence will come with boundaries, with the expectation of mutual respect. with the understanding that I am more than what I can give you. The remainder of the morning passed in a strained silence. Ellie busied herself with household tasks, moving with an agitated energy that spoke of her internal turmoil. Marcus retreated to his home office, the door closing with a finality that suggested he was processing the financial implications of our conversation. I stayed with Noah, treasuring these moments that would soon become more limited, more precious in their rarity. As I sat on the living room floor, helping Noah stack colorful rings on a cone, my mind drifted to the future I was now actively shaping. There would be consequences to my decision, not just financial ones for Ellie and Marcus, but emotional ones for all of us. Would my relationship with my daughter survive this recalibration? Would my access to Noah be restricted in subtle ways, as punishment for my newfound boundaries? The questions created a hollow ache in my chest, a doubt that whispered maybe I should reconsider. Maybe I should continue as before. It would be easier, certainly, to maintain the status quo, to keep the peace, to secure my place in their lives through continued financial support. The path of least resistance had always been my default, smoothing over conflicts, prioritizing harmony over honesty. But at what cost? I watched Noah grasp the largest ring, his tiny face scrunched in concentration as he attempted to place it on the cone. He missed, tried again, missed once more, then looked up at me with an expression that clearly asked for help. Instead of taking the ring from him, I gently guided his hand, supporting his effort without taking over the task. "That's it," I encouraged softly as he successfully placed the ring. "You did it yourself, with just a little help." The metaphor wasn't lost on me. This was exactly what I had failed to do with Ellie and Marcus: guide without taking over, support without assuming responsibility. By solving their financial problems entirely, rather than helping them develop the skills to solve them themselves, I had inadvertently fostered dependence rather than growth. The sound of the study door opening interrupted my thoughts. Marcus emerged, his expression somber but determined, and moved to the kitchen where Ellie was aggressively wiping down counters that didn't need cleaning. Their voices drifted out, low but clear enough for me to catch fragments. "Called the bank," Marcus was saying. "If we dip into our emergency fund and postpone the vacation next month?" "Can't believe she's doing this," Ellie responded, her tone a mixture of hurt and indignation. "After everything." "No choice now," Marcus replied. "We'll have to tighten our belts until I didn't strain to hear more. Their conversation confirmed what I already knew. They were scrambling to adjust to a financial reality they had never prepared for, despite having 4 years to gradually assume responsibility for their own mortgage. The emergency fund Marcus mentioned was likely the same one I had helped them establish with a generous housewarming gift when they first moved in. Noah began to fuss, ready for his mid-morning nap. I lifted him, inhaling his sweet baby scent as I carried him to the nursery. The room was painted in soft blues and greens, a woodland theme I had helped Ellie select, crib bedding I had purchased as a just-because gift when she complained about the original set being too thin. Everywhere I looked in this house, I saw my contributions: financial, practical, emotional, woven into the fabric of their daily lives. And yet, until yesterday, I had been blind to how those contributions had transformed from gifts into entitlements, how my generosity had ceased to be appreciated and had instead become expected. I settled Noah in his crib, watching as his eyelids grew heavy, tiny fists uncurling as sleep overtook him. "Grandma loves you," I whispered, stroking his cheek gently. "That will never change no matter what." Leaving the nursery door ajar, I made my way back toward the living room, pausing when I heard my name mentioned again. "Nancy's always been reasonable," Marcus was saying, his voice pitched low. "Once she sees how this affects us, she'll come around. Maybe not the full amount, but something to help during the transition." "I don't know," Ellie responded, uncertainty clear in her tone. I've never seen her like this before. So determined. Their perception of me as ultimately malleable, as someone who would eventually relent and return to meeting their expectations, sent a surprising flare of anger through me. Even now, faced with clear boundaries, they were strategizing not how to respect those boundaries but how to erode them. I continued to the living room, making my presence known with deliberate footsteps. Ellie and Marcus fell silent as I entered, their expressions carefully neutral despite the tension evident in their postures. "Noah's down for his nap," I announced, moving to gather the toys scattered across the floor. "He went out like a light." "Thanks, Mom," Ellie said, her voice carefully casual. "You've always had the magic touch with him." The compliment, likely genuine, was nevertheless tinged with calculation, a reminder of what I provided, of my value to them in practical terms. I acknowledged it with a nod, continuing to organize the toys into their designated basket. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, watching me with an assessing gaze. "Nancy," he began, his tone conciliatory. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about feeling taken for granted." I straightened, facing him directly. "Yes? You're right that we haven't properly acknowledged your financial contributions," he continued, choosing his words with evident care. "And that needs to change. We're incredibly grateful for everything you've done." I waited, sensing there was more to come. Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Ellie before continuing. "That said, this sudden change creates a real hardship for us. We built our budget around your contribution. Perhaps that was presumptuous, but it's the reality we're facing now." "I understand that," I said simply, "and I sympathize with the position you find yourselves in." Hope flickered in his eyes clearly, interpreting my empathy as the first sign of yielding. "So perhaps we could work out a transition plan. Maybe gradually reduce the amount over the next few months, giving us time to adjust our finances?" The proposition was reasonable on its face, a measured approach that acknowledged my concerns while protecting their interests. 6 months ago, even yesterday morning, I might have agreed to it, might have compromised my own needs once again in service to theirs. But something fundamental had shifted within me, a tectonic realignment that made such compromise impossible. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about reclaiming my worth beyond what I could provide to others. "I'm sorry, Marcus," I said, my voice gentle but unwavering. "My decision isn't up for negotiation. The mortgage payments have stopped, effective immediately." His expression hardened, the veneer of conciliation cracking to reveal the frustration beneath. "Just like that? After 4 years, you're cutting us off without warning, without any consideration for how this affects us?" "I've given you considerable warning," I countered, maintaining my calm despite his rising tone. 4 years of warning, to be exact. 4 years during which you could have gradually assumed more responsibility for your own financial obligations. 4 years during which my contribution shifted from generous gift to expected entitlement. Ellie stepped forward, her expression pleading. "Mom, that's not fair. We never demanded that money. You offered it." "I did," I acknowledged. "And I don't regret helping you get established. But at some point, help becomes enabling. At some point, my financial support stopped empowering you to stand on your own and started preventing you from doing so." "This isn't about empowerment," Marcus interjected, frustration evident in his clipped tone. "This is about you suddenly deciding to upend our lives based on one overheard comment that you completely misinterpreted. The dismissal of my feelings, the reduction of my decision to an emotional overreaction, might once have made me doubt myself, might have nudged me back toward acquiescence. Instead, it crystallized my resolve. This isn't sudden, Marcus. It's been building for years. Every time my contributions were assumed rather than appreciated, every time my presence was valued for its utility rather than its own sake." Your comment yesterday was simply the catalyst that helped me see clearly what I had been willfully ignoring. I moved to the window, gazing out at the neighborhood where young families pushed strollers and older couples walked hand in hand. I'm 72 years old. I don't know how many years I have left, but I do know I want to spend them living fully, not as an appendage to someone else's life, not as a financial safety net or unpaid household help. Turning back to face them, I continued, my voice steady, despite the emotion tightening my throat. I love you both. I love Noah more than I can express. But love shouldn't require me to diminish myself, to make myself smaller, less visible, less deserving of consideration. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with unspoken feelings. Marcus stared at the floor, jaw clenched, while Ellie blinked rapidly against tears. "So that's it?" she finally asked, her voice small. "You're just done with us?" The question broke my heart, revealing the depth of misunderstanding between us. "No, sweetheart. I'm not done with you. I'm done with a dynamic that's unhealthy for all of us. I'm setting boundaries, not cutting ties." I stepped closer to her, wanting desperately to bridge the gap that seemed to be widening between us. "I'll always be your mother. I'll always be Noah's grandmother. But from now on, I need to be treated as a person with my own needs and dignity, not just a resource to be utilized." Marcus made a sound of frustration, turning away as if he couldn't bear to continue the conversation. Ellie remained, her expression a complex mixture of hurt, confusion, and the first glimmers of reluctant understanding. "What does that mean in practice?" she asked after a moment. "These boundaries you're setting?" It was a fair question, one I had been considering since yesterday's revelation. "It means I'll visit on terms that work for all of us, not just when you need childcare. It means I'll contribute to your lives in ways that feel meaningful and appreciated, not taken for granted. And yes, it means I'll no longer be making your mortgage payments." By late afternoon, the tension in the house had transformed into a cool distance. Ellie moved through rooms with deliberate efficiency, her interactions with me polite but lacking their usual warmth. Marcus had disappeared entirely, claiming a work emergency that required his immediate attention downtown, a transparent excuse to remove himself from the uncomfortable atmosphere his comment had created. I occupied myself with Noah, treasuring these last uninterrupted hours with him. We sat in the backyard, sheltered under the patio umbrella I'd purchased last summer, while I pointed out birds and flowers, narrating the world to his attentive eyes. He wouldn't remember these moments, of course, but I would carry them with me, storing them like precious gems to be taken out and examined during the quieter days ahead. The sound of a car door slamming announced Marcus's return. Through the kitchen window, I watched him enter, his posture tight with unresolved tension. He spoke briefly to Ellie, their heads bent close together, before he spotted me through the window and straightened, his expression closing like a door, being shut. "Time to go inside, little one," I murmured to Noah, lifting him against my shoulder. "Grandma needs to finish packing." In the study, I methodically organized my remaining belongings, folding clothes with precise movements that helped calm the churning emotions beneath my composed exterior. My train ticket, purchased online during Noah's nap, was printed and tucked into my purse, a 10:30 a.m. departure that would return me to my own home, my own life, by early afternoon tomorrow. A soft knock interrupted my packing. Ellie stood in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Mom, can we talk?" I gestured to the edge of the sofa bed. "Of course." She sat, hands twisting nervously in her lap, a gesture so familiar from her childhood that it momentarily transported me back to conversations about school troubles or friendship dramas. How simple those problems seemed now, compared to the fundamental recalibration occurring between us. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice subdued. "About feeling taken for granted." I waited, giving her space to continue without interruption. "I never meant to make you feel that way," she said, eyes fixed on her twisting fingers. "When you offered to help with the mortgage after Noah was born, it seemed like what mothers do. Like how you've always been there for me." "I understand that," I said gently, "and I don't regret helping you. What I regret is how that help transformed from gift to expectation, how my value became measured by what I could provide rather than who I am." Ellie nodded slowly, still not meeting my eyes. "Marcus is pretty upset. He's been on the phone with the bank all afternoon, trying to restructure some things." The statement hung between us, not quite an accusation, but a reminder of the impact my decision was having on their lives. I recognized the subtle manipulation in her words, the implicit suggestion that I should reconsider to ease their financial stress. "I'm sorry it's difficult," I said, my tone compassionate but firm. "But you're both resourceful, capable adults. You'll find solutions that don't involve my continuing to put your financial needs ahead of my own." She looked up then, a flash of something, resentment perhaps, or simply hurt, crossing her face. "So that's really it? After 4 years, you're just stopping completely? Not even a transition period?" I set aside the shirt I'd been folding, giving her my full attention. "Ellie, the transition period was the 4 years that just passed. Each month was an opportunity to gradually take on more responsibility for your own finances, to develop a plan for independence. Instead, my contribution became an assumed constant in your budget planning." "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "We're first-time parents. Everything's expensive. The daycare costs alone are part of the reality of raising a child," I finished for her. "A reality that your father and I faced without the safety net you've enjoyed. We made sacrifices, adjusted our lifestyle, worked within our means." Ellie was quiet for a long moment, absorbing my words. Then, in a voice smaller than before, "Will you still visit? Help with Noah sometimes?" The question revealed what truly concerned her, not just the loss of financial support, but the potential loss of practical assistance as well. Even now, her focus remained on what I could provide, rather than on rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. "Of course I'll visit," I assured her, softening my tone. "I love you, and I adore Noah, but those visits will be on terms that respect my time and energy. They'll be about connection, not convenience." She nodded, though her expression suggested she didn't fully grasp the distinction. "And tonight? Will you still go to dinner with your friend, or—" The question trailed off, the implication clear. Now that I'd made my point, perhaps I would reconsider my plans and watch Noah for their party after all. "Yes," I said simply. "My plans haven't changed." Ellie stood, smoothing her pants with a gesture that seemed designed to hide her disappointment. "I understand. I'll let Marcus know we need to find a sitter." She paused at the door, turning back with a hint of the daughter I remembered in her expression. "I do love you, Mom, even if I haven't shown it very well lately." "I know, sweetheart," I replied, the endearment sincere despite everything. "I love you too. That's why I need to do this, for both of us." As she closed the door behind her, I returned to my packing with renewed determination. The conversation had reinforced what I already knew, that recalibrating our relationship would be neither quick nor easy, that there would be resistance and resentment before understanding could take root. But for the first time in years, I felt truly aligned with my own worth, my own needs, my own right to dignity and respect. The decision I had made, to stop the mortgage payments, to establish clear boundaries, was not just about financial independence. It was about reclaiming my identity beyond my role as mother and grandmother, about insisting on a relationship built on mutual respect rather than utility. Evening settled over the house, golden light fading to the soft blue of twilight. I had completed my packing, everything now neatly organized in my suitcase except for the few items I would need in the morning. The fabricated dinner plans I had invented as an excuse to avoid babysitting had transformed into actual solitude, a quiet meal at a small cafe I had spotted during walks with Noah, where I could gather my thoughts before tomorrow's departure. I changed into a simple blue dress I rarely wore during my stay, added a touch of lipstick, and slipped on comfortable but elegant flats. These small acts of self-care felt significant, a physical manifestation of the inner shift that had occurred. For weeks I had dressed for practicality, clothes that could withstand baby spit-up and floor play. Tonight, I dressed for myself. As I emerged from the study, I heard Marcus's voice from the kitchen, tense and clipped as he spoke on the phone. Yes, tomorrow would work. No, just for a few hours while we figure something out. I understand it's short notice. He was calling babysitters, I realized, scrambling to find someone to watch Noah during their party, the event they had so confidently assumed I would cover. The desperation in his tone might have prompted guilt in me before, might have nudged me toward offering to cancel my plans and help them out one last time. Instead, I felt a calm certainty that I was doing the right thing. Their childcare challenges were precisely that, theirs. Part of parenting was solving these logistical puzzles, making arrangements, sometimes missing events when those arrangements fell through. It wasn't a burden to be automatically shifted to me. I entered the kitchen, where Ellie was hurriedly preparing a bottle while Marcus continued his phone conversation. Noah sat in his high chair, contentedly mashing pieces of banana between his fingers. His face brightened when he saw me, arms reaching up instinctively. "Hello, sweet boy," I said, moving to kiss his head but not taking him from the chair. "Are you enjoying your dinner?" Ellie glanced at me, her eyes widening slightly at my attire. "You look nice," she said, the compliment genuine despite the strain evident in her voice. "Going somewhere special?" "Just that little cafe on Maple Street," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Their salmon is supposed to be excellent." Marcus ended his call with a frustrated sigh. "No luck. Everyone's booked for tonight." He turned to me, his expression a carefully constructed mask of neutrality that didn't quite hide the calculation beneath. "You look very nice, Nancy. Very put together." "Thank you," I said simply, not taking the bait. "It's a shame you have plans tonight," he continued, the words casual but the intent transparent. "Ryan and Megan would have loved to see you. They always ask about you, you know." The manipulation was so obvious it was almost laughable, an attempt to make me feel excluded from an event I had never been invited to except as the babysitter. I smiled, unmoved by the tactic. "Please give them my regards," I said. "Perhaps next time they're in town, we can all get together properly." A flash of irritation crossed his face before he controlled it. "Well, looks like we'll have to miss the party. All the sitters are booked." "That is unfortunate," I acknowledged, my tone sympathetic but firm. "These things happen when you have young children." Ellie looked between us, clearly uncomfortable, with the undercurrent of tension. "Mom, you're really going to go out to dinner alone? On your last night here?" The question was loaded with implication. That there was something sad or pathetic about dining alone. That my proper place was here with them. That my independent plans were somehow a rejection of family connection, rather than an assertion of personal autonomy. "Yes," I said with a simple dignity that surprised even me. "I'm quite looking forward to it. Sometimes solitude is exactly what one needs." Marcus made a sound that might have been a scoff, turning away to open the refrigerator, with unnecessary force. "Well, I hope it's worth it." The comment hung in the air, its meaning unmistakable. Worth missing the party, worth disrupting their plans, worth the resentment now simmering between us. I could have let it pass, could have maintained the fragile peace with silence, but something in me refused to let the subtle accusation stand. "Worth what exactly?" I asked, my voice quiet but clear. Worth exercising my right to make my own plans? Worth valuing my time as much as you value yours? Yes, Marcus, I believe it is. He turned, surprise evident in his expression, surprise that I had called out the implication rather than letting it slide as I might have done before. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words, the practiced smoothness of his usual responses deserting him. Ellie stepped in, clearly attempting to diffuse the situation. It's fine, really. We'll just stay home. It's not a big deal. No, it's not, I agreed, softening my tone. It's simply part of being parents. Sometimes plans change, priorities shift. Your father and I missed countless events when you were little. I moved to the coat rack by the door, retrieving my light cardigan. I should be going. My reservation is for 7. Noah began to fuss in his high chair, perhaps sensing the tension in the room. Ellie quickly went to him, lifting him out and bouncing him gently. Say goodnight to Grandma, she prompted, turning him toward me. I kissed his soft cheek, breathing in his sweet baby scent. Good night, precious boy. Grandma loves you very much. As I moved toward the door, Marcus made one final attempt. Nancy, look, if this is really about feeling unappreciated, we can do better. We can be more thoughtful, more expressive of our gratitude. But this sudden change is creating real hardship for us. I paused, hand on the doorknob, and turned to face him. This isn't about expressions of gratitude, Marcus. It's about respect, about seeing me as a person with inherent worth, not just as a resource to be utilized when convenient and dismissed when not. I kept my voice gentle but firm. And it's not sudden at all. It's the culmination of 4 years of an increasingly unhealthy dynamic, one that I allowed and participated in, but am now choosing to change. With that, I opened the door and stepped outside into the cool evening air. Behind me, I heard Marcus's frustrated exhale and Ellie's softer voice attempting to calm him. The sounds faded as I walked down the driveway, my steps growing lighter with each foot of distance. The cafe was only 6 blocks away, an easy walk through the quiet residential neighborhood. As I strolled beneath trees just beginning to leaf out in the early spring, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: sadness for the strain in my relationship with Ellie and Marcus, concern about how this change would affect my time with Noah, but underneath it all, a profound sense of rightness, of alignment with my own value and dignity. For perhaps the first time in years, I was making a choice based not on what others expected or needed from me, but on what I needed for myself. The simple act of walking alone to a restaurant of my choosing, wearing clothes selected for my own pleasure rather than practical childcare, felt revolutionary, a small but significant reclamation of self. The cafe was everything I had hoped: intimate, without being crowded, with soft lighting that cast a warm glow over small tables draped in cream-colored cloths. I was seated by a window overlooking a small courtyard garden, early spring flowers nodding gently in the evening breeze. Just one this evening? The hostess had asked, and for perhaps the first time, the question didn't carry an undercurrent of pity. Yes, just one, by choice, not circumstance. I ordered the salmon, as planned, along with a glass of white wine I would have never indulged in at Ellie and Marcus's house, where my evening routine revolved around Noah's bedtime and kitchen. Clean up. The first sip felt like permission to enjoy, to savor, to prioritize my own pleasure after weeks of putting it last. As I waited for my meal, I took out my phone, scrolling through photos of my own home, the garden I had neglected for nearly a month, the reading nook by the bay window where afternoon light created the perfect spot for losing myself in a book, the kitchen where I could cook whatever I pleased without considering someone else's preferences or schedule. Home. The word carried new meaning now, imbued with a sense of sanctuary I hadn't fully appreciated before. Not just a place to live, but a space where I could exist freely. where my worth wasn't measured by my utility to others. My salmon arrived, perfectly prepared and artfully presented. I ate slowly, mindfully, allowing myself to fully experience each bite rather than hurrying through a meal while simultaneously wiping up spills or responding to interruptions. Such a simple pleasure, dining at my own pace, yet it felt profound after weeks of meals eaten standing up or in rushed bites between attending to Noah's needs. As I finished my wine, my phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. Found a sitter. Heading. To the party now. Noah settled for the night. Travel safely tomorrow. The message was brief, factual, with no mention of our earlier conversation or the tension that had followed. But the very fact that they had managed to solve their childcare dilemma, had found a way forward without my assistance, felt like a small but significant step toward the healthier dynamic I hoped to establish. I paid my bill and stepped outside. The evening now fully dark, stars visible above despite the city lights. Instead of immediately returning to the house, I took a slight detour, following a path that wound through a small neighborhood park. The air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of earth awakening after winter's dormancy. Sitting on a bench overlooking a small pond, I allowed myself to imagine the days ahead, returning to my home, re-establishing my routines, reconnecting with friends I had neglected during my extended stay with Ellie and Marcus. There would be adjustments, certainly. The absence of Noah's daily presence would leave an ache that video calls couldn't fully soothe. The relationship with my daughter would require careful rebuilding, navigating the hurt and resentment my boundaries had triggered. But beneath these challenges lay a profound certainty that the path I had chosen, though difficult, was necessary, not just for my own well-being, but ultimately for the health of our family dynamic. By reclaiming my worth beyond what I could provide, I was modeling for all of us, perhaps especially for Noah, that love should never require the diminishment of self. The realization settled over me like a blessing, a quiet certainty that transcended the immediate discomfort of change. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever resistance or reconciliation awaited, I would face it standing firmly in my own truth, no longer bending until I disappeared. I rose from the bench and turned toward Ellie and Marcus's house, my steps measured and purposeful. This chapter was ending, but the story continued, now with me as an active author rather than a supporting character in someone else's narrative. The morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the study windows. As I made final preparations for departure, my suitcase stood ready by the door, slightly lighter than when I'd arrived. I had left behind the gifts I'd brought for Noah, the special blanket I'd knitted for his crib, the children's books I'd carefully selected to read to him during our time together. The house was quiet. Ellie and Marcus had returned late from their party, long after I'd retired to the pull-out sofa for my final night. We had exchanged only brief words, polite but distant, the emotional current between us still charged with unresolved feelings. Noah had slept through the night for once, as if offering a small mercy on this day of transition. I moved through my morning routine with deliberate care, savoring the ordinary moments that would soon transform into memories, the familiar squeak of the bathroom door, the particular quality of light in the kitchen at this hour, the comforting weight of Noah when I lifted him from his crib one last time. "I'll miss you, little one," I whispered as I changed him, memorizing his perfect tiny features, the curve of his cheek, the delicate arch of his eyebrows, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "But Grandma will come visit soon. And someday, when you're older, you'll understand why I had to do this." By the time Ellie and Marcus emerged, dressed but clearly tired from their late night, I had already fed Noah his breakfast and was sitting with him in the living room, reading one last story from the collection I'd brought. "Your taxi is here," Marcus announced, glancing out the window with a stiffness that suggested he was still processing his feelings about my departure and what it represented. I nodded, closing the book and kissing Noah's head before handing him to Ellie. Thank you for letting me spend this time with him, I said simply. It means more than I can express. Ellie's eyes softened slightly, though her posture remained guarded. You'll visit soon? Of course, I promised. And you're welcome to bring Noah to my house any time. It might be nice for him to spend time in my garden when the weather warms. The offer, extending connection while maintaining boundaries, hung between us. Not quite accepted, but not rejected either. Marcus cleared his throat, gesturing toward my suitcase. I'll take that out for you, he said, the politeness automatic, rather than warm. As he carried my bag to the waiting taxi, I turned to Ellie one last time. I love you, I said, touching her cheek gently. That has never changed and never will. What's changing is how I allow that love to be expressed and received. She nodded, a complexity of emotions playing across her face. Confusion, hurt, the first glimmerings of reluctant understanding. Safe travels, Mom. Outside, Marcus stood by the taxi, his expression carefully neutral. Nancy, he began, then paused as if reconsidering his words. Have a good trip home. Not an apology, not a reconciliation, but perhaps a small acknowledgement that this transition, however uncomfortable, was necessary for all of us. Thank you, Marcus, I replied, my voice steady. Take care of them, and remember, there's value in figuring things out for yourselves, even when it's difficult. As the taxi pulled away, I didn't look back at the house that had been my temporary home. Instead, I looked forward, toward the horizon where my own life awaited, not diminished by age or circumstance, but rich with possibility, with dignity, with the quiet joy of self-respect reclaimed. The mortgage payment I had canceled was more than money. It was a declaration that at 72, I was not finished living on my own terms, that love given freely should never become service taken for granted, that sometimes the greatest gift we can offer those we love is the example of valuing ourselves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.